Welcome back to another used car edition of what to look for in that case. Today we're going to showcase a Toyota Prius and kind of what we look for at the shop and what I see and what you guys should know about before thinking about purchasing one of these vehicles. Overall, I think it's a pretty good car, but there are some stuff you should know about, some common problems that happens to them and kind of what kind of price are we looking at. So if you ever see a Prius on the market and it has a battery light on the dash or ABS lights on the dash, be very cautious. Those two repairs are very expensive. Usually exceeds the value of the car that they're selling the amount to you for. So in an instance, say you needed a high voltage battery and the car is $6,000, or you're gonna be pretty close to paying for that price for a battery installed. I mean, it's not exactly that much, but it's gonna be at least 70% of the value of that car. And generally you see them at anything over 140,000 miles. I've seen them as low as 128 where the battery cells are defective, and it gives you the death code of the battery cells, and you just got to replace the battery. Some people try to refurbish them. It does not work in the end. It's a short term, it's not a long term repair. The battery prices have come down a little bit, being a little more reasonable as the car ages. Toyota's done a good job of lowering the cost on that battery. They make it a little more affordable, but it's still a very expensive repair, guys. So it's good to know the history of the car. If you're buying a higher mileage Prius, if it's over 140,000 miles, ask the customer if they have any idea if the battery is original or not. If it is, prepare at some time in the future to replace that battery. They do not last forever. As they age 10 plus years, you're going to have a rapid increase of needing a battery at some point in time. The Generation 3s, I think 2010 to 15 Priuses have a big problem with head gaskets. It's a head gasket material problem. If the Prius has never been done, it will have to be done. At some point, every one of those head gaskets will have an issue and they'll have to be replaced. It's a pretty expensive repair, several $1,000s, guys, to do it. But as I said before, ask and check for history, because it most likely may have been done. If it hasn't, and then prepare. You'll see a lot of them out on the market saying needs a head gasket. Yeah, it's a pretty expensive repair. It's probably why someone's dumping it. But it's a pretty common replacement. Like I said, 2010 to 2015, but it is expensive. Would it stop me from buying one? Not me, because I could fix it, but maybe you, because you might spend 10 grand, that's the market for it, and then cost you $3,000 to repair it. What kind of deal is that, you know? But overall, if you fix that, yes, it's a pretty reliable car, but it's a common problem. This is throughout all years, pretty much. The inverter coolant pump, they all go out. It's a pump that cools the inverter converter assembly. It's kind of mounted right here underneath the hood. You'll get a warning light usually because the inverter gets too hot, and it kind of it's telling you, hey, it's kind of limped it down, slow the vehicle down, because you're gonna damage some of the electronic parts. So that's not a super expensive repair, but it's just a common repair. So it wouldn't stop me from buying it, except check for history on it. Another stuff we see once in a while, it's pretty expensive, is the combination meter. Back in here, that part right here, it kind of tells you all the lights are on the dash, mileage information. Those do go out. There's companies that you can send it to repair. That's what we do, but that's pretty common. The display center with the AC, HVAC, and the battery life, all that stuff, that's another issue on some models. That goes out. Same thing, there's a company in line that repairs them. It's more reasonable. If you try to go through the dealership, I mean, I called on one, it was $15,000. It was not a joke. The guy's like, yeah, it's $15K for that. I'm like, okay. So we found a place online that repaired it. They took care of it. It's like a 2-week turnaround. I think it was like 600 something bucks. That was through the shop retail. Obviously, if you did it yourself, you save a lot more money, but it's pretty common. So expect to have that done at some point in time. Water pumps. I've seen a lot of water pump failures actually on these cars. I think around 120 to 175. It's usually the life of them. It's not a super expensive repair, but something to expect. The other thing is, as a major repair that I see, especially in the earlier models, and there was a campaign or recall out, I believe, through Toyota on certain models, certain years, is the brake actuator assembly. And let me kind of show you what that is. it is a pretty expensive repair, and you can hear that thing pumping right now. What happens is there's an accumulator that tries to keep a certain amount of pressure in the brake system, and as it gets weak, you'll hear it kick on. Let me see if I can listen to that again. So you hear that right now? That's the actual brake accumulator pumping up. It's trying to achieve a certain amount of pressure, which achieves it, turns it off. There's a problem with that actuator assembly, and it's deep down here. You can't really see, maybe see a little portion back there that says that letter B on it. Get in there, maybe. It's really difficult to see, but it's right back in there. But it's dug in there. When those go out, a very expensive job. It's usually, I think the part itself is around $1,800, pretty close to that. You gotta program it. Then you got about 5 hours to install it and bleed the brakes. So as you can see, that's pretty expensive. So if you get one of these, you're test driving and it keeps buzzing like that, or the brake lights are on, warning, and you hear it just bam, 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 I'm telling you, it's something you can do. You got to fix that part. So that should tell you to move away from that car unless you're prepared to put that kind of money into it, because it's pretty expensive repair. There's another thing underneath here. There's a coolant flow valve. It regulates how much coolant flowing through it to the heater and the coolant system, and that's pretty common repair. It's usually a couple hours to do per book time. I think it's like 2 to 4. And then the valve itself is like 120 bucks. Pretty common, see it a lot. Brakes, the good things about this car is you don't go through brakes very often. They use regenerated braking, which the motor brakes the car, uses the car, the motor uses itself to brake the car. So even though you're stepping on the brakes, your brakes are actually applying. It's the actual motor slowing the vehicle down. So there's less wear and friction on the actual brake material. So, man, you can go, I've seen this car go almost 200,000 miles before brakes are have to put on this. Obviously, it has a lot to do with how you drive the car. If you do a lot of highway driving, man, you can go 250, 300,000 miles. If you're stop and go, doing deliveries, yeah, you're gonna do brakes, probably 160, 170. Which is a long time on a set of brake pads and stuff. Shoes, man, I've seen those things go 200,000 miles, all the time. So they are easy on the brakes, so there's low maintenance there. As far as the engine, pretty reliable. I have seen people do extended range oil changes on these. That's the worst thing you can do in this car, because this car, don't forget, the engine turns on and off constantly, and if the engine doesn't warm up all the time, it can get kind of some buildup inside that engine, inside the oil and stuff. So doing long interval oil changes on these motors is the worst thing you can do, because a lot of moisture content comes in there, that oil. You want, when you get it to operating temperature, that water content comes out of the oil and it burns off. So do constant oil changes on these, even though the motor's on all the time, but it's not reaching operating temperature all the time either. So just something to think about. Other things on this car, really, it's pretty reliable. Besides that, the transmissions are extremely reliable. I've only had to do one transmission on these, which is a motor assembly, and the whole time I've been doing business. And I see a lot of Priuses. We work on a ton of them around here. Really reliable. And I think the guy was in a wreck and he cracked the case and it leaked coolant. I think that's what happened to it, if I remember. But it seems that the drivetrain's pretty reliable in these cars, which is a good thing. Parts are pretty, as far as like brake stuff, pretty inexpensive. But some of the stuff, like I was telling you about the accumulator, actuator, brake assembly, is pretty expensive. The water pump's pretty pricey. Head gasket, it's an easy job. I mean, we've done so many of them, but it's a pricey job for retail wise. But overall, like anything else, maintenance is key on this vehicle. But I do recommend buying these cars. If you're buying one that's been like wrecked or it's been abused, it's not a good idea. If it's been taken care of and the things we talked about have been taken care of with the vehicle, it's a great car, great choice. But if you're buying one for $3,000 and you need the battery, you need the head gaskets, yeah, it's a bad buy. So that's why I'm trying to give you this information before time, so you're out there looking. Now you know what to look for, what questions to ask. So that's very good information to have in your pocket when you go look for a new one or a used one on the market, by the way. If you guys like our content, put a comment below. Please subscribe to the channel, help grow it. And like I said, if you're gonna do it right. See ya.